All right, we're back for some more college basketball best bets here on the channel for Wednesday, January 29th. Yesterday, not a bad day, not a great day, just a day. So it is what it is. We move on now to today. Looking for a better day, but again, we are getting better. We're getting back on the right track. And of course, I think we got a big day in store today here for college basketball. And folks, before we get into the best bets, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more daily college basketball best bets here on the channel. We're taking this again all the way to March Madness and beyond. And we will have more content for you on the channel past basketball season as well, because we're going to be doing our MLB best bets once the MLB season starts as well. So you're going to have a little bit of an overlap as well, I think. We might have a little bit of an overlap with MLB and college basketball. Probably not, actually. So, again, we'll have best bets for you, though, all the way throughout the year, obviously, until football season. When the NFL starts back up again, college football, we got you covered here on the channel. All sports-related stuff except for, like, hockey. But I watch hockey, just can't give you best bets on that. Anyways, make sure that subscribe button down below and leave a like. We'll be back in a couple hours for our NBA predictions that are also daily as well. We've got, I think, 9 games in the NBA today, so make sure to check that video out in a couple hours. I'm actually going to the Warriors-Thunder game today. And also make sure to go check out our UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia predictions with Israel Adesanya, Nasruddin Imavov in the main event. The co-main event, Shara Magomedov takes on Michael Venom Page, a big fight in the middleweight division. All right. Let's get on now to the first of our 5 best bets for today, and we're going to start things off here with some small school college basketball. We're going to have 3 small school games to kick things off, 3 big games, honestly, and then, of course, we'll have, some more bigger school games, obviously, in the SEC and in the Mountain West. But we're going to start things off here in Greensville, this is Asheville, North Carolina. Between the UNC Asheville Bulldogs and the Radford Highlanders. We're taking UNC Asheville at home. This, guys, is the best team in the Big South Conference this season. High Point's pretty solid, but UNC Asheville has beat High Point earlier in the season in North Carolina. Their only loss so far this year in conference play is to Longwood, but since that Longwood loss, they go to Presbyterian and win. They beat SC Upstate. They beat Winthrop. They are coming off of back-to-back road victories at Gardner-Webb and at Charleston Southern. This is a team that is undefeated this year at home in Asheville, North Carolina, in the entire season, even dating back to their non-conference schedule as well. I mean, recently their losses are just Longwood on the road. That's not a bad team out the Big South, and obviously UNC Wilmington, a Seahawks team that's been killing everyone this season, and a team that's going to be in the NCAA tournament and will likely be, I think, at least a 14, potentially 13 seed in that tournament as well. But for the Bulldogs, this is a 15-6 team. They are led by Jordan Marsh, who averages 17.5 points a game. He is he's a pure scorer for this Asheville team. He can drive the basket. He can get to the line. He's a very good pure scorer for the Bulldogs. You get Josh Banks and Toyez Solomon, who are also averaging both 15, and then you get Fletcher Abbey, who's averaging 11 points a game as well. Solomon, again, though, is the big in this UNC Asheville lineup. Again, averaging those 15 points, but also averaging about 8 assists a game as well, and 1.5 blocks. For the Radford Highlanders, another good team out the Big South, but again, I just think UNC Asheville is better. Radford, 14-8 as a whole this season, but coming off losing 2 out of their last 3 coming into this game. They're coming off of a road win at Presbyterian, but back-to-back losses prior to that against Charleston Southern on the road and against Longwood as well. They are a 4-3 team in conference, the other loss being obviously to High Point, who has been pretty good this year in conference play. The wins in the Big South are Winthrop, South Carolina Upstate, Gardner-Webb, and in Presbyterian as well in their last game. For the Highlanders, this is a team led by Jarvis Moss. The guy who's going to average 14 points a night, but I don't really know how Radford's going to be able to keep up with the Bulldogs in this game. They do play good defense. That's how the Highlanders win in the Big South. But again, they only have one player averaging more than 10 points a night, and that is Moss. Moss is averaging 14, and then you get Brandon Macklin, who averages 9, Josiah Harris, Truth Harris, who both average 8.5, and then everyone else averages less than 6 points a game. I just don't know how the Highlanders on the road in Asheville, North Carolina are going to be able to keep up with the Bulldogs. This is a fairly low-scoring team. Even when you look at their wins, they are all low-scoring affairs. Hell, if we want to date back to the non-conference schedule, right? A 63-48 victory over Chicago State when they, Play North Carolina Central on the road. They win 70-67. They go to Salt Lake, lose to Utah, only put up 60 points. Same in the Colorado State game. They play South Carolina, the Gamecocks, and they put up 48 points in that game. They lost to High Point, 76-58. They just don't score all that much. Hell, the loss on the road at Charleston, they put up 54 points in that one. I don't know how they're going to be able to keep up with the UNC Asheville team that is all around just a way better scoring team. And sure, again, their last couple games have been low-scoring affairs against a pretty solid defensive team, of obviously in the Buccaneers of Charleston Southern, and a 61-53 victory over Gardner-Webb as well. But I think, again, if UNC Asheville is able to play effective defense, Radford's going to just have even more trouble scoring. And again, I think the best pure scorers are on UNC Asheville, and that's obviously Jordan Marsh, a guy who dropped, I believe, 30 in his last game, 28 points in the win on the road at Charleston. He made up 28 of the 69 points that the Bulldogs scored in that game. So I do think UNC Asheville is the better team. You get, again, guys in the glass like Toyaz Solomon. You also get Greg Nat Jr., who's been really playing well in the glass recently, or at least he's been getting a lot of boards. He's been playing extended minutes. This is a guy who's going to be playing 30 minutes a night recently, and he's been putting up 9-8 boards a game. You combine him on the court with their other forward in Solomon. They've been pretty good down low recently, again, with Nat playing extended minutes. He's not really going to score, but he's just primarily one of your bigs who's going to give you a lot of defense. Again, him and Solomon, they both really play forward. They don't have a true center, but again, both these guys are really good down low. Nat's just on the court to play defense, and obviously Solomon can score, but also grab boards at the same time. I think it's a good Bulldogs team. I think they have a good combination, again, of scorers, like, again, we were talking about earlier with Marsh and Banks and Solomon too, but of course that combination of those guys in the bigs with Solomon and Nat, I think they're the better team in this basketball game. And on top of that, we get UNC Asheville at home. This is the game that's going to kick off our slate today, a 3:30 spot on ESPN Plus, I believe. Yes, at the Kimmel Arena on ESPN Plus at 3:30. We're going to take UNC Asheville. I'm very surprised the odds are where they're at. Asheville is only a 2.5 point favorite at home, -150 on the money line. I like the Bulldogs a lot in this spot. Again, I think they're the better team than Radford. They have the better record, the better conference record, and on top of that, the game is at home for them. So everything to me points to UNC Asheville winning this basketball game and covering the 2.5 points as well. I think they're going to be able to outscore Radford. And yeah, I just don't know how the Highlanders are going to be able to keep up. So give me UNC Asheville at home to beat the Radford Highlanders and cover the 2.5 points in the process as well. We've got more small school basketballs. We're going to have a lot of that early today. And now we're going to stick in North Carolina, and we're going to head on over to Greensboro, North Carolina, at the Fleming Gymnasium here for East Tennessee State on the road, taking on the UNC Greensboro Spartans. We're going with UNC again, but this time, obviously, UNC Greensboro. Hell, we took North Carolina yesterday, and that was just an abysmal choke at Pitt. It was horrible. They couldn't score in the last 4 minutes of that game. I mean, what are we doing? Every game, man, UNC just goes right down to the wire, and they can't find a way to win. Regardless, we're taking UNC Greensboro in this spot. The Spartans have been good this year in the SoCons, recently. They've won 3 of 4. I get it. Some of these teams in this conference aren't that good. We're talking about the Citadel in West Carolina and VMI, which happen to be 3 out of their last 4 wins. But the teams that UNC Greensboro has lost to have been somewhat decent. Again, the SoCon's odd. They are 6-2 in conference this year. Their losses are Mercer and Samford. Again, the Samford loss, who cares? That's the best team in the conference. The Mercer loss at home by 1 point is bad, but it was a close game. Again, a very competitive basketball game. They went back and forth in that one. Again, UNC Greensboro is regrouped and they won their last game on the road at the Virginia Military Institute. But we can't just forget about what this team did early in conference play this year and how they have a non-conference win over High Point. I remember we took High Point in that game, and ultimately that's what put High Point in the ban list for us, was their loss to the Spartans of UNC Greensboro at home, by the way, for High Point. But for the Spartans, again, we can't forget what they did earlier this year in conference play, beating Wofford on the road. That's a big victory. Beating Furman at home, it is what it is. I mean, that's a good win. Going to Chattanooga and winning keeps on aging better and better now that Chattanooga is 5-3 in the conference. I think UNC Greensboro, again, we get them at home. We're trying to take some home spots here, and I like this squad. Again, led by Kenyon Giles, who's averaging 16.5 points a game. Donovan Atwell averaging 14, and you get Ronald Polite III, who's averaging 13 points. For the East Tennessee Buccaneers, this is a 5-3 team so far in the SoCon this year. They are 12-9 as a whole, and they're coming off a loss at home against Chattanooga. Again, Chattanooga is not that horrible. A loss early in the year at Furman. it is what it is. There's just some really bad teams in the SoCon. Again, West Carolina, Citadel, and VMI are just the ones that are fairly bad. Mercer is, sometimes Mercer's really odd. They beat UNC Greensboro, obviously, this year, and East Tennessee goes to Mercer and just wins the game by 2 points. But I think, again, by far the worst teams are West Carolina and the Citadel. Maybe if you want to put VMI in that same conversation, that's okay. But I do think UNC Greensboro is the better team. And on top of that, the game is in Greensboro, North Carolina. East Tennessee State led by two really good scorers in Quamari Peterson and Jaden Seymour. Peterson averaging 18.5 points a game, Seymour averaging 18. Then you also get John Buggs III, who's averaging 11.5 a night. East Tennessee can score, UNC Greensboro can score. I'm going to be expecting a lot of points in this game, but I do just think the Spartans are able to outscore East Tennessee. And additionally, I like this spot for UNC Greensboro because the game is in Greensboro, North Carolina. Again, I think these teams are very even on paper. I think the odds reflect that fairly well. Again, as we look at the odds, you get minus 125 for the Spartans, plus 105 for the Buccaneers. I'm okay with that line. I think it's a good line for this one, but I do think it's a line that we can take UNC Greensboro with. I don't think it's a mispriced game. I just think, again, the Spartans should be able to win this one at home. It's a home game for them. I think these teams are very even on paper, and I think the Spartans are able to barely get the better of East Tennessee here. I get it. Again, UNC Greensboro has played a lot of competitive basketball games recently. The 1 point loss against Mercer at home is not great, but again, this is still a 6-2 team in conference. They went to Wofford and won earlier in the year. They go to Chattanooga and win. They're still not that bad of a team. Again, I know beating West Carolina is not all that impressive, but just 3 games ago, they went to West Carolina and won the game by 30 points, right? Again, so kind of disregard the last 2 games. I know, again, you don't always want to say that, but a loss by 1 point to Mercer is what it is. It's a very competitive game. And then going to VMI and winning, it's hard to go on the road and win. And UNC Greensboro did that. And now, again, we are tasking East Tennessee State to go on the road to beat a solid UNC Greensboro team, a team that's been better than them all year long. Yeah, I'm going to take the UNC Greensboro Spartans to win this first matchup between them and East Tennessee State. We like the Spartans at home to win this one, and we think they cover the 1.5 points as well. Next up, we move to another small school basketball game as we go to the Swisher Gymnasium here in Jacksonville, Florida, as we have got the Jacksonville Dolphins hosting the Florida Gulf Coast Eagles. A huge game in the ASUN and between maybe the 2 best teams in the ASUN this season. We like Jacksonville a lot here. This is one of my favorite plays of the day, honestly. Jacksonville at home against FGCU. We've seen FGCU play this year, and they sold us horribly earlier this season. They've been a lot better recently in the ASUN, but as a whole, guys, Jacksonville is just the much better basketball team. This is a team that is 7-1 in the ASUN this season, with their only loss being early in ASUN play. But again, they are a 13-7 team who has really turned things around. They were 6-7, obviously, at one point of the season. They started their ASUN league play by losing to Lipscomb in their first one, and they have not lost a single game since, beating Austin, PA, beating Bellarmine on the road, beating Eastern Kentucky on the road, beating North Alabama, beating Central Arkansas, going to West Georgia and Queens University, winning both of those games. And Jacksonville, almost every single night, they're going to be led by Robert McCray V. This is an elite scorer for them. He's a guy who can get it done everywhere. He averages 17 points a night. He averages 17, 4, and 5. He's a good basketball player. He's going to lead Jacksonville literally everywhere. He leads them in points by far. He's their only double-digit scorer. But again, McCray's a guy who can attack the hoop. He can shoot it. He's a very good player just all around. Very solid defensively, too. For the Florida Gulf Coast Eagles, they're led by Dalian Johnson, who's averaging 14.5 points. Xavier McLean's averaging 12, and Keyshawn Kellman also averaging 11.5, with Jevin Muniz also averaging 11 points a game. I just don't think Florida Gulf Coast is as good. I just don't think they are. Sure, they can score, but they will have games where, again, it's just Kellman, or it's just Johnson, or hell, it's Muniz. They're like one guy on this on this FGCU team is going to go off and score. But just the team as a whole I don't think plays as well as Jacksonville does. We saw Florida Gulf Coast earlier this season, and I watched them play last year as well. I know obviously it's a much different team from last year when I saw them in Bloomington, because again, the transfer portal, but still, just don't think Florida Gulf Coast is on that level. I know, again, conference plays a whole nother deal. The ASUN, though, doesn't really impress me all that much. They went to Queens and lost. They went to Eastern Kentucky and lost, which, again, I don't think are horrible losses. Those are teams that are okay. I think Queens is a little bit better than Eastern Kentucky this season, not by much. But to the same extent, though, they still have to go on the road here against Jacksonville. I'm surprised the line is where it's at. I would expect minus 4.5 for Jacksonville here. I mean, that's kind of where I'd place this, maybe minus 5.5. again, Robert McCray is going to make all the difference. This is a guy who's going to play 35 minutes a night like he did in the Queens game. He drops 24. I mean, again, he is everything for this Jacksonville Dolphins team. And I think Jacksonville's just the better squad. When you look at Florida Gulf Coast, again, a team that they can score it, but just that non-conference schedule, man, was so bad to start the year. They go to UNC Greensboro and lose, expected to lose, obviously, to TCU, St. Bonaventure, and Drake, but then they lose to Northeastern, they lose to Furman, they lose to UNC Wilmington, who turned out to be a good team, but it's just, man, I don't know. Again, if you're losing at Queens and Eastern Kentucky, you're probably losing at Jacksonville as well. This team hasn't had to go on the road that much yet in ASUN play, at least against really good teams. I mean, they went to Bellarmine and won, and they went to West Georgia and won, but most of their wins obviously are home spots at Florida Gulf Coast. And I get it. Again, I don't think this is that big of a trip for Florida Gulf Coast over to Jacksonville. I mean, hell, Florida Gulf Coast has got to be on the Gulf of America, right? The new name, right? I think that's on Google Maps, regardless. Anyways, I think Jacksonville gets it done. It's an in-state game, but I do think the Jacksonville Dolphins are the better squad. So give me the Jacksonville Dolphins at home to win and cover. Again, we really like Robert McCray, and I think McCray, again, is going to be the guy who, obviously, we need him to have a night. If McCray goes off, again, we should be fine. So give me Robert McCray to score 20+ and take home the victory here in this ASUN matchup between the Jacksonville Dolphins and the Florida Gulf Coast Eagles. We move on now to our fourth game of the day, and yes, we did promise some bigger school games, and obviously this is where we're going to start now. In the Southeastern Conference, the game of the day, obviously, this one's buried on SEC Network. Really? They buried Mississippi State and Alabama on SEC Network when Texas and Ole Miss is on ESPN too? That's surprising. I mean, ESPN, I'll be at the game that's going to be on ESPN tonight between the Oklahoma City Thunder, the best player in the NBA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Steph Curry, obviously, the Golden State Warriors on the other side. If you want to see our prediction and breakdown for that game, join us in a couple hours here on the channel. But you get Alabama going on the road to Starkville to take on Mississippi State. I know why Mississippi State is favored to win. I completely understand that, but we have faded Mississippi State enough, and we're just going to continue to do it. It comes down to Josh Hubbard. It really does. This team, I think, again, they can win without Hubbard, but if Hubbard's on, they're really tough to beat. We saw that at the end of the SEC play last year. We saw that in the SEC tournament some, obviously. When Hubbard is excelling, and obviously he was a freshman last year, he's a sophomore now. When Hubbard's, knocking down all those threes, this Mississippi State team is tough to beat. But when he's not, they're not that great. They're a 4-3 team in conference play this year in the SEC. The win against South Carolina to start the year, the Gamecocks are horrible. Colin Murray-Boyles and the guys just aren't really getting it done. They go to Vandy and win, which is aging all right. They lose to Kentucky, lose to Auburn on the road by 22 points. They beat Ole Miss in that overtime game where I felt like Mississippi State was trying to keep Ole Miss in it, but they win. They go to Tennessee and lose at Rocky Top, and then they go to South Carolina and win the game by 5 points against a bad SC squad. But a win is a win on the road. It is what it is. But where Mississippi State has struggled all year long is against really good teams, and hell, top-ranked teams. And Alabama is still the 4th-ranked team in the country. They have 3 losses all year long. It's at West Lafayette early in the season, against Oregon in a tough one, and then when they hosted Ole Miss, which, I'll be honest, was a game that threw me off earlier in the year when we were picking Mississippi State and Ole Miss. That's why I picked Ole Miss. I mean, hell, we picked Ole Miss to win the game outright, but we also had them covering as well, which obviously covered. But Bama, since the Ole Miss loss, so they go on the road to Lexington and beat Kentucky. They beat Vandy and they beat LSU. I get it, beating Louisiana State's not the most impressive victory, but Bama has bounced back in a very needed way. They are 17-3 this season, and I get it. Going on the road in the Southeastern Conference is difficult. It is, don't get me wrong. But I do think Bama's better than Mississippi State. I don't think Mississippi State's really the 14th best team in the country. Just don't think they are. Guys, when Mississippi State has played good teams, they've lost. Right? Sure, they beat Pitt early in the year when they were ranked. They beat Memphis when they were ranked. But are Pittsburgh and Memphis really top 25 teams in the country? Probably not. Okay, Ole Miss has their games, right? Kentucky, Auburn, Tennessee, all good teams, but they've lost all those games. Again, Mississippi State, guys, half of their wins in the SEC this season is South Carolina. And South Carolina still hasn't won a game in the conference yet. So I do think to a certain extent, the Bulldogs are kind of padded right now in their conference record. I think Alabama is just the better team. And I think Alabama has the better playmakers. And obviously that starts with Mark Sears. It goes down to Grant Nelson and Aiden Holloway. I do think they are the better players. And obviously I think Sears is the best player on the court. again, there is the Josh Hubbard dilemma where, yes, when Hubbard is on, he is an absolute monster, but Hubbard has not really taken over a game recently like he did to kick off SEC play against South Carolina and like he did towards the end of SEC play last year in his freshman season. He's still taking a bunch of shots and sure, he'll score, but again, like if you look at Hubbard's just numbers on paper, oh, okay, he scores 12 points, whatever, 12 points, 5 assists in 30 minutes, okay, but think about the line that he really puts up. 12 points, he goes 2 for 9 from beyond the arc. The Mississippi game, he scores 10 points, okay, great, well, he goes 1 for 4 from 3 and 5 for 7 at the line. The Auburn loss where they got killed, he goes 2 for 12 from the field, 2 for 10 from 3, he scores 17 points, but he goes 11 for 12 from the line. So it's just, again, when Hubbard's scoring, again, the South Carolina game was the best example of this. He goes 5 for 10 from beyond the arc, 7 for 13 from the field, and he scores 21 points in 22 minutes. Obviously, that was a blowout to kick off SEC play in Starkville early in the year in Mississippi. But again, when Hubbard is on, that's the type of numbers he's going to put up. But we haven't seen that crazy of a performance recently out of Josh Hubbard. And ultimately, that's why I can't pick Mississippi State, because I do think the Bulldogs have to play close to a near perfect game in this one to beat Alabama. And that starts with Josh Hubbard. I don't trust Hubbard to play a great game in this one. Riley Kugel's been playing well. I think he led them in points in their last one. Again, you're going to get an assorted, you're going to get Cameron Matthews who can step up in spots. But again, it's going to be Kugel, Matthews sometimes, and obviously Josh Hubbard. But we still, again, Hubbard will lead them in points, but will it be an efficient night out of Josh Hubbard? Again, it will be a good numbers, like, the example I'll make was yesterday when the Lakers played the 76ers. You look at the line, oh, LeBron James scores 30 points. Again, looks great on paper, but when you really dive deep into it, sure, he had a good fourth quarter, but LeBron had 9 turnovers in that game. It just wasn't a good game for the Lakers. That's the same thing when you talk about what Josh Hubbard's been doing. Again, when you look at it on paper, oh, Hubbard scores 17 points against Auburn. Okay, he scores 14 against Tennessee, but when you really dive deep into it, what is he actually doing to score those points? He's still eating up those possessions. He's still taking 13 shots and he's scoring on 2 of them. And sure, he's getting to the line, but that's not going to ultimately win you games against really good teams. Again, Mississippi State can get by with Hubbard playing like that against some of these teams like South Carolina, obviously, but they're in for a gauntlet coming up. They host Bama, they host Mizzou, they go to Athens, they host Florida, they go to Ole Miss, they host Texas A&M, they go to Norman to play Oklahoma, and they go to Alabama after that. I mean, Mississippi State has a gauntlet of a schedule. And right now they're sitting at 16-4, sure, but only 4-3 in conference play. Whenever they play a good team in the conference, they lose, right? I mean, sure, they beat Ole Miss, but I don't know. I think Bama should be able to go in here and win. They are the better team. They have won big games this season when they went to UNC and won, when they went to A&M and won. They hosted Oklahoma and blew them out. They went to Kentucky recently and won the game by 5 points in a high-scoring affair. I think Bama outshoots Mississippi State. I think they outscore Mississippi State. I just think the lights are too bright for the Bulldogs in the spot. It's the biggest game so far this season for them. They want to go to 5-3 in conference play, but I think they're going to go back to 500. Give me the Alabama Crimson Tide on the road in Starkville, Mississippi, to beat the Mississippi State Bulldogs. We move on now to our final game of the night, and it will come in the Mountain West Conference, where we have the Boise State Broncos at home in Boise, Idaho, hosting the Nevada Wolfpack. This line's moving from 6.5 and 7.5 back and forth, so hey, for the purpose of the video, I put 7.5 on the screen, but right now, as I'm seeing it, I'm seeing 6.5 for Boise. So I'm going to count it as a win if Boise wins the game by 7 points, because the line I'm seeing right now, the graphic, I guess the line has moved within the last hour of me making the graphic, is now 6.5. I will take the free point. So we have Boise State minus 6.5 to beat Nevada. I know what you're thinking. Boise's been really bad recently. They have. This team still has talent. Don't forget that. They've just been playing bad on the road. This is a horrible road team, but a very good team at home. Sure, they lost to SDSU earlier in the season at home. San Diego State had a really weird one yesterday against San Jose State. They ended up edging the Spartans out in San Diego. It was a really odd basketball game. But for Boise State, a 5-4 team in conference this season, but just a much better team at home. Again, back-to-back losses on the road. They go to the pit and lose. Well, hell, I don't know if anybody's going to the pit and winning this year in the Mountain West. I don't know. I really think New Mexico can win the Mountain West this season. I get it. Utah State's good, but whatever, right? They go to the pit and lose in New Mexico. They go to Colorado State and lose. They go to Utah State and lose. They play a competitive game on the road at San Jose State. They play a competitive game on the road at Wyoming. But they play much better at home. Let's just compare. Again, I know it's the Wyoming Cowboys. They're coming off a loss at San Jose last weekend, but just comparing, this is the only team that we can base this off of with Boise. But when Boise gets teams at home, they're just not competitive games. When you got to go to Idaho, they're much different than when Boise's got to go to you. Again, Compare the Wyoming games. The first time Boise played Wyoming, it was in Laramie. Yeah, the school in Laramie. They won the game by 9 points. Again, a victory for Boise State that would have covered the line that we have today. But then when Wyoming comes to Boise, Boise beats them by 40. It's different when Boise gets games at home. They're just a much better home squad. And going on the road in the Mountain West is fairly difficult. Nevada's a team that is 11-9 this season, but 3-6 in the Mountain West. And obviously, again, Nevada had that very miserable start to Mountain West play. They were just on the wrong side of a lot of equations in the Colorado State game. Close, lose it by 2, lose to Wyoming by 3. They lose to Utah State by 5. They lose to the Lobos in the pit in the 1000th game in the pit in overtime, thanks to a Nelly Jr. Joseph floater from the free throw line that ends up winning it at the buzzer for New Mexico. They beat Fresno on the road in OT, right? I mean, they've played so many competitive games, but back-to-back spots, man. They go to Utah State, they get blown out, and they just hosted San Diego State, and the Aztecs beat them by 19. Again, I don't think SDSU's bad, but I don't think SDSU's that good. I think this is more of just Nevada's playing horrible basketball right now. Nick Davidson leads this team, Kobe Sanders, True Coleman, those are your guys again for Nevada. But again, everything I've said, I still believe in. I do think Boise State's the better team. This is a team that's led by Tyson Degenhart, who's going to be averaging 18 points tonight. You get Andrew Meadow averages 12. Alvaro Cardenas is averaging 11.5 as well. Javon Buchanan, averages 10 points a game as well. Boise's playing like the better team right now. I think they are. Again, that's not saying much because Boise's been pretty bad recently. But you compare that to what Nevada's been doing, and on top of that, again, I think if history shows us anything this season, Boise's a much better team at home than they are on the road. And again, Nevada's got to come to Boise for this game. I think Boise's able to cover this line. Again, I'm going to take 6.5 because I just saw that on ESPN. If it's 7.5, it's 7.5. But again, the official line we're working with now is minus 6.5 for Boise State. So if the Broncos win by 7, we win. I'm going to count it. I think Boise's the better team. Again, it's hard to go on the road in the Mountain West and win basketball games, and it's hard to go to Boise and win a team that plays much better at home than they do on the road. I think they take care of business here against a Nevada team that just has seen their conference play keep spiraling in and out out of control, and I think it continues to go that way. So give me the Boise State Broncos at home in Boise, Idaho to win the game against the Nevada Wolfpack and to cover the 6.5 points as well. So folks, thank y'all for watching our 5 best bets for college basketball here on January 29th. If you have not yet though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Folks, thank y'all for watching, and Mamba forever.